All right, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I see a few more people. I'm going to let them straggle in here before I start. I think I know everyone in the room. Okay, that's good to know. It's a friendly audience. Good evening, ladies. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is the City Manager's Budget Workshop, and a way of introducing the budget to the community. We started about 5 years ago, and it was a way of just getting the information out into the public so that people could ask questions in a more calm, casual environment. As you all know, the council will take this up in June and theoretically adopt the budget in June as well. So this is meant to be a forum where you are welcome to perhaps try to better understand what it is we're doing with your money. I'm Alex McIntyre. I'm the City Manager of Menlo Park, and I am pleased to present my 7th budget to the community. The budget is a $141 million spending plan that implements the City Council's adopted work plan, enhances service levels to the community, and transfers additional monies to help fund future capital improvement needs. The theme of this year's budget is From Vision to Fruition, which reflects an enviable financial position where the community begins to experience the fiscal benefits of key land use decisions. From the Park James Hotel downtown here in Menlo Park to the Hotel Nia outside of Bellhaven to approved development plans for long vacated lands along the El Camino Real, the community's vision is coming to fruition. With that said, I will always continue to urge the City Council to continue its tradition of fiscal prudence by taking advantage of this new financial condition to plan for the many projects desired by the community as outlined in the City Council adopted work plan and the capital improvement plan. We're going to spend about the next hour talking to you about this $141 million spending plan and what it's going to bring to the community. To get there, though, we have a few items here for you to consider. Today's agenda will be presenting the budget message, which I will do, the budget overview, which Administrative Services Director Nick Pegueros will do. Then each department is going to present its budget and what they do with their money and what has changed from the prior year's budget. And finally talk to you about next steps, and then at the end give you an opportunity to ask questions. Like I said, this will take about an hour, so be patient, and we will get through this. As I said earlier, the budget's a $141 million spending plan across all funds. Interestingly enough, we have a little more money coming in at $144 million. So the budget is, if you hear nothing else today, the budget is balanced. The city has 48 funds, but the fund that's probably the most important fund is the city's general fund. It's the fund where the council basically gets to exercise a lot of discretion around funding its priorities. The general fund, it typically funds the police department, the community development department, the community services department, the library, some of the public works department, and the administrative services functions of the city. The general fund is about $67 million this year, and we are showing about $500,000 in net revenue, and what that means is we have about $500,000 more coming in revenues projected than proposed to be spent. Now, when we build the budget process actually starts in January with the City Council's adopted work plan. Our goal around that is not only does the council adopt a work plan, they also adopt budget principles for us to follow in building the budget document. Another big assumption is the economy is very robust here. There is no doubt about it that you will find the cost of services virtually everywhere a little higher than anyone ever expects, and we experience that on a daily basis. We have a healthy growth in property taxes. We budgeted, I think, a 6% increase in property taxes for the 18-19 budget, and that's probably very conservative. The number may come back even higher. And we also showing a full year of operation for the Hotel Nia, which I mentioned is the hotel near Facebook, as well as a partial year of the Park James Hotel, which is the hotel downtown on the El Camino. And in each year, this is a technicality, but in each year we only reflect one half of what we call the ERAF rebate. And the ERAF rebate is a very technical, complicated state switcheroo on cities, but basically we end up getting a return each year. It's basically like your income tax return. We end up getting more money back than we put into it. And we only show 50% of it because we never know in any given year when the state is going to take away the ERAF. And it's something we've never wanted to be dependent on as a revenue source, despite the fact it has been a constant revenue source for almost 20 years. The other thing you're going to find in this year's budget is we've actually had an opportunity to enhance services. So not only are we able to balance the budget, maintain all services, but we're actually enhancing services, and I'll walk you through very quickly what those are, and the departments will walk you through the balance. Some of the service enhancements, for example, this year include a $25,000 so that we can light up Bellhaven the way we light up our downtown and just spread that joy during the holiday season. Expanding power washing of sidewalks in the downtown. One of the number one complaints we do get from the downtown is the condition of the sidewalks, the look and feel of them. So we're going to be stepping up the city's investment and making it look cleaner. The drought took a toll on the city's tree canopy and on the city's forest, and we have in the past year and proposing again next year to expend significant funds to maintain those trees, to prune those trees, if not actually removing the trees that are dead, and these are all on public property. Library program augmentation of $88,000, including things like expanded library hours, as well as investing in things like Project Read and other kinds of services. We are, very importantly, also transferring another $3.5 million to the capital improvement program, which is above and beyond the city's already $2.9 million we already transfer. So we are moving a lot of money into CIP to start saving for the rainy day when we need to spend money on big capital projects. Some other things you'll find in the budget to the tune of a little over $1 million is $507,000 for contract staff in public works, community development, and administrative services to really help us deal with the peaks and flows, the peaks and ebbs of some of the work that comes our way, and we're able to contract that out to the private sector. We also have a contingency set aside of $615,000, and as I said earlier, as we go out into the private sector to secure contract services, we are finding it more and more expensive to secure those services. So we are parking some money away so that when we do go out, we don't really tip our hand completely on how much we have to do these services. And a lot of this is like contract services for janitorial, for certain kinds of street cleaning and whatnot. And as we go back out and do these, we're finding the tickets coming back much higher than we ever anticipated. And we're also, again, with the fully balanced budget, also asking for 9.25 new positions, which will total a little over $1 million. And these positions are in public works, 3 in public works, 1.5 in the police department, converting a bunch of temporary employees into full-time staff for the library, doing a similar thing in community services, and adding 1 position in admin services. The CIP, one of the things you might ask yourselves if you looked at last year's budget, you would wonder how our budget got to be $141 million. We are appropriating all funds for all activities across the board for anything that we may do this year, including carryover projects of nearly $30 million and another $17 million in new funding for projects. So that's the reason why the budget took such a big bump. We're asking the council to do a wholesale appropriation across all funds, all services, all projects. Future CIP needs. And so what I mentioned is we're moving monies into the capital improvement fund so that we can fund some of the things that are up here that are not funded at this point. The Caltrain crossing at Ravenswood, there is $0 for that. The Bayfront Canal and Atherton Channel Flood Protection Project, there are $0 for that. The Bedwell Bayfront Park Master Plan implementation, again, $0 for that. The downtown parking garage, we just heard a presentation on this a couple of weeks ago, and Jim Cogan in his last meeting mentioned there are $0 million for that project. And information technology master plan implementation, we have partially funded this, but our need is about $8 million, and we're only about halfway funded for the moment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick Pegueros, the city's administrative services director, and he's going to walk you through some of the budget detail, and then he will follow up with each department. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Just for the audience's note, we did print a couple copies of the budget in the back there. You'll notice that they are watermarked draft. We will be finalizing that for the council staff report here on Thursday. However, we anticipate no changes in the numbers and most likely be minimal narrative changes. So just wanted to throw that out there before I begin. So this is my third budget with the city, and I'm very excited to present the 2018-19 budget. What I'll do is I'll go through several several slides primarily focused on the general fund, since that is the city's largest fund and is responsible for the majority of the city's services to the community. So as Alex mentioned, the resources across all funds are shown here, broken out by their different types. The resources comprise both revenue and transfers in, which is why we use the term resources as opposed to revenue. The total resources for 2018-19 is $144 million, and you can see the breakdown there. If we look just at the general fund share of the total all funds, we see here the taxes are the largest revenue, and I will go into that in greater detail. But the total here is just about $68 million. On the requirement side, again, requirements is represents both expenditures as well as transfers between funds, which is why we use the term requirements. On the all funds total of $141 million, you'll see the allocation of those expenditures by type. And then similarly for the general fund, $67,444,000. You'll see that salary and wages, as well as fringe benefits, are the largest share of the general fund. I think this is a duplicate. These are duplicated. Okay, there we go. So the next slide I'd like to go into is the general fund property tax. Property taxes are our single largest revenue. They are derived from a variety of sources, but primarily the base tax roll, Prop 13. The growth that we see in our property taxes are generally the Prop 13 escalation factor, which is about 2%, is the base. And then above that is any reassessments that result from property improvements or property transfers. You'll see the trend here is significantly on the upside. The reason that you see that the 2018-19 budget is slightly lower than the 2017-18 budget is that 2017-18 we received 100% of the excess ERAF that Alex mentioned earlier. As of this point in time, we have no indication that we would not receive that full allocation. So this, however, continuing with the council's prudent budget practices, we only budget 50% of it. So I fully expect that bar will be higher next year, pending, assuming nothing changes at the state level. More recently, we have seen significant growth in our hotel tax, our transient occupancy tax, with the addition of new hotels. Here you'll see a rather steep increase for the 2018-19 budget. This is reflective of the new hotels, Hotel Nia for a full year, as well as the hotel, the Park James Hotel for partial year. We do not expect this incline or this rate of increase to happen year over year. However, we do account for, and we account for that in the 10-year forecast. Sales tax is the city's third largest revenue or third largest tax source, and as you can see here, it pretty much is flat year over year. Sales tax is a revenue source that, for the most part, isn't growing. It isn't changing considerably, so we're expecting basically flat revenue there. On the expenditure side, salary and wages, one of the things I'd like to point out is that the budget for the most part budgets for full staffing. We do make an assumption for vacancies of about 4%. But as anyone who has been to a council meeting recently has heard, the city has had challenges filling vacancies, which has had an impact on certain services or work plan items. When you look at the increase from 2017 2017-18 estimated actuals to 2018-19 proposed. We're not really comparing apples and apples there because we had a much higher vacancy in 2017-18 than we were expecting. However, the 2018-19 budget does include the new positions. On the fringe benefit side, this is a distribution of our fringe benefit costs, retirement being the first part of the graph there. Retirement, as you may be aware, is an area of concern for a number of public agencies due to changes that CalPERS is making to assumptions for those costs. We have fully incorporated the known changes, and as you'll see in the 10-year forecast, we also include what we expect the future changes to be. The second largest is health and welfare, or health and other insurances, and then there's a small component above that. Finally, on the expenditure side, or on the requirement side, I'd like to highlight the city's history with transfers. As the city manager mentioned, we are including $3.5 million of higher transfer than traditional or than the city council policy in the proposed budget. You'll see here that over the last several years, we've had the transfers have fluctuated considerably, and these really speak to one-time needs that the council has identified towards the end of the fiscal year to make use of those funds. So now I'd like to jump into the 10-year forecast, which has been an exciting project this year. Each year, the Finance Division prepares a 10-year forecast, which takes all of the known factors that we are aware of at the present day. In the past models have been relatively simplistic, however, in large part due to response from interest from the Finance and Audit Committee. We implemented a new modeling this year to arrive at a more, what we believe, more reflective or more representative long-term forecast. We ran over 1,000 trials, and what we're going to show here is sort of the most likely scenario. In the 10-year forecast, we have the new revenues. We do assume or anticipate, make an assumption. It's everyone's guess when it's going to happen, but we all know that it will happen eventually, an economic downturn and the recovery for that. All of the personnel that have been budgeted or have been requested in this budget are included for the 10-year forecast. However, we do acknowledge that through the 10-year, particularly when there will be, or when there is an economic downturn, that there may be an effect on staffing as services may decline in that type of environment. And I think one of the key elements here is that the city's reserves are maintained consistently over the 10-year forecast at about 60% of our operating budget, which is quite enviable for a city budget. So as we just look at the revenue over expenditures for the 10-year forecast, the lighter bar there is our operating revenues. The darker bar are the operating expenditures, and then the line is the net revenue. So this is this will be the change to the city's unassigned fund balance at the end of each fiscal year, increasing, as you can see, in 2018-19 by $420,000, and then fluctuating throughout the 10-year cycle, in large part due to assumptions that were applied in the model. So with that overview, I'd like to kick off the department operating budget presentations. In the absence of the assistant city manager, I'll take the city manager's office, start very quickly with the city council, city attorney, city managers, and then I'll go into my own department. So in city council, relatively modest budget, primarily composed of personnel costs and community funding initiatives. In 2000, this should read 2017-18. The key elements for the city council adopted a 59-item work plan, which helped guided the development of this budget, as well as approved a number of master plan items, as well as the Guild Theater most recently, and work on both the redistricting or the district elections and the charter. The city attorney's office. The city attorney is the chief legal officer to the city council. city staff and boards and commissions. His budget, or the budget for the city manager, is about $750,000, $837,000, primarily in the area of contract services or contract counsel for areas outside of the attorney's retainer. For 2017-18, notable accomplishments were some assistance with complex land use matters, including litigation with another agency, 500 El Camino guidance, Stanford and Menlo Gateway, et cetera. The initiatives for 2018-19, again, primarily assist as needs arise and focus clearly on the district elections and as well as BMR housing as necessary. The city manager's office. City manager's office was reorganized in this budget. It includes previously it included the Housing and Economic Development Office. This has been moved to, the Housing and Economic Development Office was moved to the Community Development Department, and Mark Munzer will talk about that when it gets to his budget. As you can see, 10 full-time equivalent employees. Key accomplishments in 2017-18, review development agreements with Facebook, a rather extensive employee engagement initiative called Menlo Perk was managed out of the city manager's office, and also a significant movement on solid waste rates. For 2018-19, the city manager's office will work to develop the City Council's work plan as well as communication work plan and the other items listed there. And this is just a list of council work plan items for 2018 that are assigned to the City Manager's department. So with that, I will move on to Administrative Services, which is the department that falls under my responsibility. Administrative Services is Finance, Human Resources, and IT. Our total budget is $6.19 million in, sorry, it's hot. $6.19 million in the operating budget for the department, plus another $11.5 million in non-departmental, which is primarily the funding of workers' comp, et cetera. For 2017-18, here's a list of a number of accomplishments. Just a couple I will highlight. On the human resources side, we had significant activity and 60 recruitments, resulting in 49 new hires and 19 promotions. The 2018-19 budget does include a request for additional full-time staff in the Human Resources Division to assist with a significant number of recruitments as well as other personnel matters that have arisen. Key initiatives for 2018-19, the Employee Engagement Initiative that I mentioned earlier that was previously managed out of the City Manager's Office is moving to Administrative Services, as well as complete the implementation of the Human Resources Information Management System, which is the online time card project. And then finally, my dry department presentation. Here's just a quick slide of our initiatives next year. John McGurr has been a employee of the city for over 20 years, and he's retiring this year. We're very sad to see him go, but we're very happy about his next step in life here. But for City Council work plan items, we have Information Technology Master Plan and Employee Engagement. And now I will pass it on to Mark Munzer, Community Development Director.
Thank you, Nick. Good evening. Again, Mark Munzer, Community Development Director. So the the Community Development Department is comprised of three different work groups: the Planning Division, the Building Division, and as noted, as of the new fiscal year, we'll be incorporating the Office of Housing and Economic Development. There's already a lot of synergies that exist between planning, building, housing, and economic development, so that made sense. The department's overview, an $8.8 million operating budget. Our new FTE count with Housing and Economic Development is 31 staff members. What did we do in 17 and 18? The two that I would really like to highlight, because of the differences in process, our Stanford 500 El Camino Real, so that mixed-use project was approved and was the result of several years of community efforts. Conversely, the Guild Theater quickly came to our attention at the beginning of this year. We recognized that it was a city council priority, and we re-strategized in community development so that we could review it quickly and get it to council as soon as possible. It did go last week for its first reading. For presently what we're doing, we're processing what is now 24 discretionary projects. Some of the highlights of those, which have been mentioned, are Facebook Willow Village, proposed Hampton Inn on El Camino Real. On the building side of the house, staying with accomplishments and highlights, 2 large developments were completed. Facebook Building 21 is wrapping up as we speak. Menlo Gateway Phase 1, which is occupied an office building by Facebook and by the Hotel Nia. In addition to that, we issued permits for the next Facebook building for Station 1300, as I'm sure many of you who ride Caltrain can see is a giant hole in the ground now. Will soon be filled with a mixed-use building. We also internally began electronic plan review implementation. So right now, if you come to our department, there are rolls of paper everywhere with these large projects that are being proposed. It's not the most sustainable way to review plans, and it's also not the most efficient. So we are in the process of changing that to an electronic plan review. For our initiatives for 2018 and 19, both long-range plans, the El Camino Real Downtown Specific Plan and the Connect Menlo Plan are scheduled for additional reviews. The discussion of the downtown parking structure, as mentioned before, Facebook Willow Village, and looking at a few other single-family residential and housing element programs to implement in the next fiscal year. Our work plan items, and there the picture noted there is a new project that was just approved last month, I think, directly across from the Caltrain station. But again, our work plan items are 3 of the top 6 for City Council: the downtown parking structure, the Guild Theater, which again is hopefully wrapping up its entitlement process, and then the implementation of the downtown plan. So with that, I will turn it over to Derek, the Community Services Director.
Good evening. I'm Derek Schweigert, your Community Services Director. Just wanted to provide a quick overview of the Community Services budget for this year. As you may know, Community Services provides a number of programs and services which are listed above, from anywhere from child care, our facilities with the community centers, the senior services, and so forth, as well as programming at Menlo Atherton, at the Menlo PAC, and gymnastics. So the overall budget for this year is we're proposing $9.8 million budget. Of that, that's composed of 52.25 FTEs, and of that amount, 0.75 would be an increase for gymnastics staff. And essentially, that is helping to replace temporary staff that are in the program right now. Unfortunately, we've been having to cancel classes for gymnastics, and this will allow us to hire, to make full 3 positions for gymnastics program, and also help us to restore a lot of the classes that we've had to cancel over the past year because due to the lack of staffing. Just a quick overview of accomplishments over this year. We continue to implement the 5-year strategic plan that was adopted in 2016. We completed the Bellhaven Pool Audit and Master Plan project that went through Parks and Rec Commission and the Council. We completed the Bedwell Bayfront Park Master Plan as well. We were really happy to be a part, along with Public Works and so forth, to be a part of the Marketplace Park renaming to Carl E. Clark Park. We negotiated the professional services agreement with our private contractor, Team Sheeper, to provide aquatics programs here with the city. And then we continue to maintain our cost recovery levels that Council adopted. And just moving along, some of the initiatives for this coming year in 18-19 that we hope to accomplish. We will be looking at completing the Parks and Rec facilities overall master plan update. We will implement the department's strategic plan, continue to implement the strategic plan, and then continue to also implement the council's decisions based on the cost allocation study that was approved. And there you go. And in terms of our work plan items, the three items that Community Services have for the City Council work plan is the completion of the Parks and Rec Facilities Master Plan, our Burgess Snack Shack project, as well as the Park Playground Improvement Project. And with that, I will turn it over to Susan Holmer, our Library Services Director.
Good afternoon. I still see the sun outside, so it's afternoon to me. Susan Holmer, Library Services Director. For the library, we operate a library system that has two locations, right here on the Burgess campus and over in the Belhaven neighborhood located in the Belhaven School. In both of our locations, we provide the services for adults and for children. Oh, I did it again. For adults and for children. We also have our literacy program, which is headquartered here in the main library and offers ESL classes at the Belhaven branch. Obviously, I've got my finger in the wrong place. Okay, on the right page now. In our 18-19 budget request, we are asking for a operating budget of approximately $3.89 million, most of it coming from the city's general fund. We are also requesting 18.5 FTEs with personnel costs of $2.86 million. We're asking for three new positions, those being 2 librarians and 1 library assistant. For us, those are converting temporary staff positions to permanent positions. And they will be working both in our Belhaven branch and in the main library. With our total proposed account being 18.5 FTE. For our highlights and accomplishments of this year, we actually began the process of the Belhaven Library Needs Assessment. We added an additional 13 hours of service to the Belhaven branch, including 3 nights, all-day service on Saturday, and then Sunday afternoon. Those hours for the evening and weekends reflect the same hours that we have in the main library. The branch interior was refurbished in January with new paint, new furniture, and new carpeting. It was a vast improvement from the old facility. The collection of materials for adults was removed and replaced with new materials, and new collections were added for teens and for bilingual materials. Additionally, we've held 3 community meetings to talk about the process of siting a potential new main library. A report to the council on this process was presented earlier this month. Program numbers and program attendance have increased throughout our system. We have increased attendance at children's programming by 76%, which is a phenomenal amount, and a 10% increase in adult programming. In our 2018-19 program initiatives, we're planning to do some fairly substantial events. We're going to do a branch library space needs study, which will determine how many square feet might be required to incorporate the desired library services that are currently being identified in the branch library needs assessment. A conceptual design for a new main library, which, if approved, will be the next step in the process of incorporating 21st century library design into the library system. 3 additional permanent positions are being requested. This will be the first year of a 2-year phase-in of permanent staff, which will help the library reduce its reliance on temporary staff. 2 librarians, 1 for adult services and 1 for youth services, as well as a library assistant who will help in library administration, will help move the library forward to the recommendations that were in our 2015 organizational review. These new positions will help reduce the complexity of using a large number of temporary staff increase the level of service that we provide to the community. Additional program augmentation includes greater city funding support for our adult literacy program project READ. Previous funding resources were dependent upon grants, upon the state, and upon donations, all of which have declined throughout the years, leaving the program in a position where it can no longer expand literacy services to the community. Additional funds to support a variety of programming for children and adults and for use of the Performing Arts Center are also being requested. Funds to develop a community comprehensive staff development program have been requested. This program would actually target the skills needed for staff working in a public library environment. And then there is a final request to increase our custodial services at the Belhaven branch. Our expanded hours are beyond the service goals of the school district, so we are asking for funding for custodial services on weekend and vacation time. If I don't turn it off again, I get to introduce Dave Bertini.
Thank you, Susan. Good evening, everybody. Dave Bertini with your police department. I'm here to speak about the police department. And we have 4 programs in the budget. They are patrol, which is the most visible to all of you. Those are our patrol officers, our traffic officers, parking enforcement officers, code enforcement officers, etc. Our investigations, which are general detectives and our special investigations unit. Our communications, which is all our 911 dispatchers here at our police department. And administration, which includes command staff, the records division, training and hiring, and emergency preparedness. Our 18-19 proposed budget is approximately $20 million. It's a little bit higher than last year, and that's because it includes the newly funded Beat 4 program for the new police beat. And we are also asking for 1.5 increase in FTEs, and that is a request for a service level enhancement. What we're looking for is a second code enforcement officer. Our current code enforcement officer has a backlog of hundreds of code enforcement issues. As a matter of fact, every week I get a complaint about code enforcement and the fact that there's such a backlog in those, and that employee really does need assistance in code enforcement. The second increase is to make a half-time dispatcher whole into a full-time dispatcher, and that position will assist in the new text to 911 system that I'm going to be talking about a little bit here in the future. Some of the accomplishments, as you see on the screen there, one of the big ones is we filled 15 vacancies in the last year, and that's a lot, and that's including 13 police officer positions. We completed our mindfulness training for the entire police department. That is the Resiliency Immersion training. And our antenna is up and running, brand new antenna is up and running, and we initiated the Beat 4 program this year. Also, some continuing programs which we will be expanding in the next year is our Friday Night Lights. Community Police Academy, which starts in September. For anybody who's interested in going, it's the adult version, so it starts in September. Take a look at our website for that information. We're going to continue to have town halls and what we have created something called Chats with the Chief in the next year. And we are maintaining our crime stats at the low levels not seen in a decade. And that's even with a little bit of an uptick in property crimes due to state law changes. We still are at all-time lows. Some of our other initiatives for the next year is we're going to complete the staffing of the new Beat 4 initiative and program. The text to 911 call system is going to be live this fiscal year, and we're very excited about that. It'll allow anybody in our jurisdiction to pull out their phone and hit 911 and actually send a text message to a dispatcher in those situations where they may not be able to make a phone call. So that's going to be really great for public safety. We're going to complete a police commander recruitment and continue our efforts to keep our crime at one of the lowest rates in decades. And of course, have hopefully staff dedicated specifically to traffic, including motorcycle officers, while implementing a data-driven strategic traffic enhancement plan. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Justin Murphy, our Director of Public Works.
Great, thank you, Chief Bertini. So as he said, I'm Justin Murphy. I'm your Public Works Director, and I'm going to give you an overview of the department. So we plan, design, construct, repair, and maintain the city's infrastructure, and we're organized in a few divisions of engineering, transportation, and maintenance. And then one function that we also provide that cuts across both engineering and maintenance is the city's water utility. So that's we provide water to about half the city, and that's a completely enterprise fund that's completely funded through ratepayers. So in terms of the overview, our proposed budget is $76 million, and that is a larger number than last year, and part of that has to do with what the city manager said in terms of how we're reappropriating some capital projects. So that number includes both operating and capital, including carryover projects. For the proposed budget, we've included 70 employees with a net new increase of 3. So that's 1 construction inspector to keep pace with the development, and then 2 water personnel to implement the city's water system master plan. So that's the second phase of staff augmentation. There's a number of highlights and accomplishments. Many of them are achieved through collaboration with the other departments in the community. Just wanted to highlight a few. One, as Susan mentioned, was the refurbishment of the Belhaven Library. So those 2 gentlemen helped orchestrate it in collaboration with the library. Then at the right, you see the new one of the new bus shelters installed in Belhaven, and at the bottom is the below ground work of the city's first emergency water well, and we'll be working on the above ground improvements shortly. So there is ongoing work, and I'll highlight a couple of those. One is the Chrysler stormwater pump station. So you see a rendering there of the proposed design, which has been done in collaboration with the Bohannon's Menlo Gateway team, and then also an expansion of the city's herbicide-free park program. In terms of some of the specifics with the capital improvement plan, it's a total budget of $47 million, and that's comprised of the approximately $29 million of carryover, and then $17 million of new projects. And the list there includes some discrete projects that are being proposed. This is in addition to some ongoing work every year, such as transportation improvements, park improvements, building improvements. In terms of new initiatives for the department, the top 2 on the list are part of the City Council's top 6 council work plan items. The first being implementing the Safe Routes to School program, so we hope to be able to award a contract for that in the second meeting in June, so we're looking forward to that. And then the second item, completing the transportation master plan, so you see a photo of the outreach and oversight committee that's helping to assist with that project. And at the bottom you see 4 maintenance workers. We'll be focusing in on the department organizational review this year, which is a key initiative for us. So these next 3 slides are just meant to show the long list of projects for which Public Works is in the lead on council work plan items. So that's 34 projects. Some of them have been covered in the enumerated highlights and accomplishments, but that's the full list of 34 items for which the Public Works is in the lead. So with that, I'll turn it back to Alex, our city manager.
So that concludes basically the high-level summary of our budget that we're going to bring to the City Council next week. 2 important next steps for this audience and anyone else who may be paying attention is on June 5th, the City Council will hold a public hearing. It'll be a notice public hearing on the budget. This is very typical for us. And then on June 19th, the council will be asked to adopt the final spending plan. And really what this represents, and I've had this conversation several times with many people, this is the culmination of a process that starts in January, ends in June, but then the work begins to start to implement and start to spend the monies and invest those funds in ways that the community expects, with the outcomes the community is hoping for. So we look forward to seeing the council's reaction to this. And I thought I saw Kat Carlton in here. I'm sorry, Kat. Normally I would have introduced you. I didn't realize you were joining us today, and I'm happy to have you here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open this up for questions. And what I'd like to do is I'll facilitate the questions. If I can answer them, I will do so. Otherwise, if they need to go to a department head, I will ask that person to come up and join us. So, Mr. Shepard.
What analysis does the city make to determine whether it's cheaper to outsource projects rather than hire additional staff?
We do a few things, and we've learned this lesson over the past about 4 or 5 years, where what we're discovering is the cost from the private sector is actually more than the public sector, than providing the service in-house. We still prefer to provide it outside, because as work ebbs and flows, we're able to kill a contract much easier than it is to get rid of employees. So, I mean, there is an analysis that's done, and virtually every time we've done it, we have discovered that the cost to do so just isn't. I mean, the savings that want to be realized just aren't there.
I'm surprised, but
right now, we are discovering, and this is what I was saying earlier, with the contingency funding we're holding aside, we are discovering time after time that we go out to contract, it is much more expensive than we ever estimate. And it's just because the economy, it's hard for any employer anywhere to hire good talent, whether it's on the private side or the public side. We hire good talent. I want to be clear about that. So, other questions from anyone? Don't be shy. Okay, we got one more back here. Sure. Sure. Brandon, can you go up to the computer and manage the computer for me to get to slide 11? I think you said slide 11. Is that what you said? 11 and 12. 11 and 12, that's fine. And Nick, you might want to come up here and I can kick this off and you might want to complete it. I think if I'm remembering the slide you're referring to, it's the pie chart that shows our resources. And I think Nick Pigueros had mentioned that number was a little bit larger. No, that number wasn't larger. It was larger in great part because of property taxes. And we roll up all taxes under one category called taxes. And one of the biggest drivers this year is property taxes going up, but also the 2 hotels coming online have dramatically increased our revenues in the taxes area. I think in the budget itself, there is more detail that you can see as it breaks down by resources, and we're happy to show that to you if you want to sort of take this offline. We're happy to point that out to you. Certainly. Other questions from anyone? Yes. Oh, sorry. I think I'm doubling. Take this one. I think I stole the microphone. I know you can't. Yell with us, not at us, right? Of course. Jen, you can yell at us. Come on.
I'm gonna yell. So I'm just curious. I'm of course drawn to the streets and transportation section of the thing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And I noticed a few things on here. The Willow Oaks Park bicycle connector, some things that I'm excited to see here. And I also noticed, Sharon sidewalks and Middlefield, Linfield, Santa Monica. And I'm just curious, what do those things mean being on here? Because I know they're not on the work plan.
Right.
And then I'm also confused about the Oak Grove and whether 60.
Justin.
Oh, maybe the Oak Grove bike pilot, whether there was money in there for the the pilot extends.
I'm going to let Justin answer those because this is his world.
Great, so thanks. So happy to follow up with you afterwards specifically, but generally when you're seeing things, I think what you're identifying is you're seeing things in the 5-year CIP. It's not in the 18-19 funded, and it's listed as unfunded. So that means that it's something that we are targeting, as year to year, things kind of move forward, so there's no guarantees, but that is something that the city is targeting for a future project. So that's generally, and then you asked specifically about the Oak Grove. Yeah, yeah. Right.
Where do these things come from? How does it? I know where the Sharon sidewalks and the Linfield thing comes from.
Yeah. The Willow Oaks one was in the last year's draft CIP as well, and I think it's an idea that came from improving bicycle connections. So it's a community idea that was in last year's plan as well.
One of the things we do with a CIP, and it's a capital improvement program or capital improvement plan, is it's meant to be a 5-year rolling plan. And what that means is we put ourselves out on the horizon for 5 years to try to figure out where are the sources of funds going to come from to pay for these things. We know they're important, we know they're priorities, so we start to figure out what those funding sources might look like. And if you remember Nick's slide, can you show the 10-year forecast? If you remember Nick's slide about the 10-year forecast, we showed out these operating surpluses each year. Conceptually, not always, but conceptually, those are the kinds of funds that we would start to cobble together to say, hey, we need to have enough money to pay for this thing, whatever this thing happens to be. So if that helps, that's the process of the 5-year work plan. Okay, all right. Other questions? Yes?
Question is, and I didn't get a chance to look through all of the attachments that came with the budget. But my question is, how are the permit fees determined in construction projects, and where do they reflect in the budget?
I'll take this as the high level, and I may have Mark come to do the details. So the permit fees basically are typically a percentage of the cost of the project. And so you take a single-family home, obviously that number is going to be a much smaller number. You take a Facebook project, that's a much larger number. Under the revenue side, you'll find it for charges under... Where'd Nick go? Charges for service. Thank you. You moved. And that's where we budget these things. Again, they tend to be aggregated together. They're not shown as a piecemeal, but each of those that are paid by, say, a developer, it's a public number. There's no secrecy around what they paid for their permits. And then if you want Mark to come up and explain more about how it's calculated, or Mark, can you do that, or high level?
If I could just add,
Nick.
Sorry, I'm speaking from the audience. It's budgeted in both charges for services on the planning side, but on the building side, it's budgeted under licenses and permits. And I do want to point out that the revenue collected is offset by an equal amount of expense that we incur, either personnel providing services or contract staff.
Right.
And then I would also just quickly add, all of that is on a portal on the city website, all of that, and it's uploaded monthly. And I'd be happy to share the link or whatnot, and that is how we're transparent about the fees that are collected.
And just to echo what Nick just said, the city does not make money on those kinds of permits or charges for services. These are purely the cost to provide the services reimbursed back to the city. The argument there is the general taxpayer should not subsidize a private development. More questions from anybody? Yes.
I was hoping, Alex, that you could explain a little more of the CIP process, why that's being worked into mostly Public Works.
So Public Works is responsible for basically the public infrastructure of the city, both maintaining it, designing it, funding it, building it. And so it belongs in Public Works, certainly, that they generally take the lead. And I think, as Justin said, probably I will estimate about half of the work they do, they are in partnership with either other public agency, other departments in the city, or other public agencies in the community. Probably about 50% of the work they do is their own work for their own not their own benefit, for benefit of the community, though. So, Public Works has always owned the capital improvement plan, because so much of the coordination of all of these projects happening at once need to be managed by one entity, and that typically falls to Justin and his shop.
Thank you. This is not the correct term. Undefined fund, a fund where there's a large sum of money that can be transferred to other projects in the event that that's needed, or it can be used for balancing. It was part of the fund in our last year's budget that was looked at in terms of using that to help offset the costs of the library, our portion of the cost to the library. I can't remember the term, though.
Do you?
It's unassigned fund balance.
Thank you. An unassigned fund balance really is the city's reserves, essentially. And we have some that are designated and some that are undesignated or unassigned. And the council has a policy which sets up sort of a hierarchy of designation of funds that we will always have available in case of emergency disaster, economic shifts. We have a PERS fund right now, PERS reserve. And so we do have and the council can change all those at its own will. Like, that's the council's purview to certainly do so. But again, I think Nick used the term enviable financial position. People look to Menlo Park right now and say, we have figured it out. We are doing very well for ourselves. So, or on your behalf, at the public's behalf, certainly.
I can follow up.
So it's basically, it's a fund balance, and you'll find it as a beginning fund balance on various charts, and I think Nick will just point that out to you. We'll happen to point it out to everybody, but not everybody may not have the budget in front of them. So, other questions? Ron, you're looking at me like you have a question. Okay. Anyone have any other questions? Oh, yeah, Cecilia, sorry.
My question is, how do you create a fund? So if you want a fund for a specific project,
Sure.
How do you create one?
So, Nick, I'm going to have you handle this. I can give you a high level, but I think Nick's going to help.
So funds are created by a vote or an action of the city council. What we need from the city council is approval for the source of funds as well as the use of the expenditures, so that as our auditors audit those new funds, we have city council action which provides the authority to establish those.
And the most recent fund we did create was the Library System Improvement Fund that the council created about 9 months ago, I believe, and they seeded that fund with about $1 million. So it started with $1 million, and anything related to the library improvement project, whether it's the main branch here or the Bellhaven branch, all those funds, all those expenditures come out of that fund, and the council actually authorized the city manager to have different levels of authority with that fund versus other funds, because we wanted to keep the project moving, because sometimes we can get in our own ways to slow things down. So I hope that helps. More questions, comments, thoughts? If not, I'm going to turn you all back to hopefully you have wonderful dinner plans tonight. Next Tuesday night, 7 p.m. will be the council meeting. That you know how the council works. Sometimes this will be early on the agenda or later. It just depends on other items that may be before them. The public hearing will be the first opportunity for the council to both hear from the public about the proposed budget, as well as to hear from themselves and their reactions to it. And then we tend to listen carefully to the council's comments, and we come back 2 weeks later at the final meeting in June for the council to adopt. And there's a series of resolutions the council adopts that basically approves and creates the budget for the new year, which starts July 1st. All right, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. This is a bigger audience than we've ever had, so thank you for coming out, and we are happy to answer questions. We know this is a boring, tedious document. We are very aware of that. That's why we put a lot of pictures in to try to entertain people. It does tell a big story, though, about who we are and what we do, and so this is an important document for the council, and if you do have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Certainly Nick and his staff is very happy to answer them to really help you understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and where all this is coming from. So we understand this stuff is messy, and we try to simplify it as much as possible. So thank you all, and have a good evening, and thanks for joining us.